Are you tired of the ANC drama but still somehow find it super interesting? Us too. In this week's episode, or rather this week's wrap, we bring you the latest in this week's episode of Game of Luthuli House. Plus, we look at how our revenue service is tracking down all those dodgy tax evaders. Plus, there's the latest development in the Mozambique conflict, how our vaccine acquisition is suddenly going very well, and why Charlotte Maxeke was a total badass. So, let's dive into your weekly simple news updates brought to you by me, Verashni Pillay, and the rest of the Explained Akosa team. First up, our take, don't turn a blind eye to Mozambique. Last week we told you about the conflict in Mozambique. It's the regional story that has everyone's attention, and so it should. A quick recap. Energy companies Sasol and Total are developing a huge gas find in a province called Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique. It is one of the biggest gas discoveries in Africa and could have revolutionized the impoverished country. But locals have not seen any improvement to their lot, while their country's leaders have lined their pockets. Local militant insurgency started in 2017, but it's intensified over the years. Late last month, a well-organized attack overwhelmed the paltry Mozambique security forces at the Total plant, triggering a terrifying attack that saw locals and expat workers, most of them, or rather many of them South Africans, fighting for their very lives. The Islamic State, IS, has claimed responsibility, and the local militant group who is responsible for these attacks is said to be loosely associated with them. But as we reported last week, this is ultimately a local conflict that has been exploited by the publicity-seeking IS, also known as ISIS. Now, the South African development community, SADC, took a while to take action considering the issue started escalating around mid-March, but they're not alone. With communications to the area cut off during the conflict, the global and local response was dire. But the world seems to be waking up at last. Today, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and others are attending a special SADC meeting to decide on a response to the conflict. Ramaphosa is the incoming SADC chair, as if governing South Africa was not enough work. We'll fill you in on what steps SADC decides to take. But with the US military training Mozambique forces and the EU also getting involved, all eyes are on the Southeast African nation. Funnily enough, despite all the drama, the country's currency continues to perform magnificently. The Metical has appreciated 14% against the dollar since the beginning of February, making it the world's best performing currency in that period, according to Bloomberg. Now, just a reminder, if you're really worried, the worst the conflict could do to us here in South Africa is maybe threaten our gas supplies. It is highly unlikely to actually reach our borders, but that does not mean we should ignore it. Humanitarian violations are a daily occurrence now, and we must continue to push our leaders to try and find a safe, peaceful solution for the people of Mozambique. On to our big story, SARS cracked down on diplomats, of all people. In a plot that could be taken straight out of a movie, the South African Revenue Service, otherwise known as SARS, has uncovered a tax-dodging racket in which foreign diplomats buy large volumes of alcohol at duty-free retailers and sell it locally, cheating the tax collector of an estimated 100 million rand in taxes every month. This is according to a new explosive News 24 report. We know, right? Talk about opportunism. It's also blatantly illegal. Thankfully, SARS has caught on to the scheme and is cracking down. It has identified the diplomats as being from Rwanda, Ghana, Burundi, Guinea, and Malawi, and is taking action against these crimes. But it's not just our African neighbors. Last year, authorities said a German diplomat was also spotted buying large volumes of duty-free alcohol. Now, to explain why this is a big deal, South Africans are not allowed to buy from local duty-free retailers, which don't add our country's taxes to their prices. Diplomats only are allowed this privilege from places set up just for this purpose. But some unscrupulous types have used it to buy pricey alcohol like KWV for just 70 rand, less than half of what it would cost at a legitimate local bottle store for us locals. They then mark it up and sell it to a local trader who adds their own markup and can still sell it to the public at a lower price than usual. Now imagine doing this to the value of millions of rands. And of course, we all pay the price. SARS receives less revenue and government spending is curtailed. Now SARS is putting in place quotas and other regulations to curtail the problem, particularly if it turns out to be more widespread. In another positive crackdown, Commissioner Edward Kisvetter said that SARS was also looking into the lifestyle of particularly individuals to examine their unexplained wealth. And they're looking everywhere. In one recent case, the tax body noticed a businessman boasting about a new car on social media. His declared income did not support him being able to purchase it, and an investigation was launched. It gives a whole new layer to those #blessed posts people love to share on social media with their recent acquisition. In another case, SARS noticed a bunch of Ferraris parked outside a hotel. Tracing the license plates, they found that the owners had declared a taxable income of just 34,000 Rand a month. We don't know about you, but we wish we could make our money go that far. It goes to show you can't outrun the tax man forever, especially when he's been hard at work fixing up the house since it was gutted during the Jacob Zuma state capture years under Tom Moyane, who was the former SARS commissioner. Onto your briefs. Winter is coming to House ANC. Does anyone else feel like the latest fight backs in the ANC are a bit like the last season of Game of Thrones? Poorly written, lots of hasty attempts at resolution, and everyone has stopped caring? No dragons, unfortunately, but we can't have everything. The problem is, of course, that all the factionalism seems to distract the governing party from actually governing. But we, as I explained, are duty-bound to fill you in on the latest politicking in Westeros, Luthuli House. And truth to be told, we find it just as interesting as you. So, here goes. The background. The ANC reformist faction under Ramaphosa is fighting the Radical Economic Transformation Group that's loosely aligned to former President Jacob Zuma and beleaguered current ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule. Now, while the first lot aren't perfect, they're definitely preferable. As Business Day put it this week, in the choice between half good and almost evil, i.e. Ramaphosa's lot and Zuma's lot, we're going with the former. In this week's episode of this drama, Zuma's speaking notes from his engagement with the ANC Top 6 last week were leaked, and boy was it entertaining. 23 pages of the most self-pitying, delusional ramblings from the man who unbelievably ran our country for nearly a decade. Now, these are the cries of a man and his factions decidedly on the back foot. Now we're just waiting for the Constitutional Court to decide whether he goes to prison for contempt after refusing to appear before the Zondo Commission. And that's not his only legal woe. On 17th May, his long-awaited trial related to arms deal corruption is set to begin. That should keep us going for another season at least. On to other news, South Africa turns our vaccine frown upside down. Things are constantly changing with South Africa's vaccine rollout strategy as conditions change, so we're going to keep updating you. Last week we told you about government's new plan to start phase 2 of the program in mid-May, with the bulk of vaccinations concluding early next year. At that point, we'd only procured Johnson & Johnson's vaccines. But this year, Health Minister Willem Kize says we have signed a contract to secure a whopping 20 million vaccine doses from Pfizer Biotech for the next phase. According to Reuters, this means, all in all, South Africa's government will have enough to vaccinate roughly 41 million people out of our total population of 60 million. After all the prophecies of doom, it's amazing to know that we're hopefully back on track. There's also news of millions of doses coming our way via the COVAX shared facility and the AU. The real test now that we have so much stock is the rollout of these vaccines. Meanwhile, the idea of vaccine apartheid continues to provoke discussion. The fact that developed nations like the US were able to snap up much more than it needed while the rest of the world had to wait is not right. Israel, for example, has been lauded for its swift vaccination rollout. The country was able to buy vaccines before they were even developed, but Palestinians who are in the country are far behind and are getting second preference to vaccines. While we're here, remember the raging debate about ivermectin's efficiency in treating COVID-19? This week, the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority and other parties won the case to allow the mostly veterinary drug to be used to treat COVID-19. Doctors can now legally prescribe the medication. And this week we remembered an icon, Charlotte Maxeke. Her birthday would have been 150 years today. She inspires us to do and be more. She was born in 1871, and despite the oppressive times she lived through, she managed to become the first South African black woman to obtain a BSc degree. Remember, this was at the turn of the last century. She traveled to the UK and US with her choir, and after being abandoned in the US by her choir director, she went on to win a bursary to study at the prestigious Wilberforce University and graduated in 1903. Maxeke returned to South Africa with a passion for education that she would carry for the rest of her life and for equality. Together with her husband, Marshall Maxeke, she established a school in Everton, Katlehong. It still exists till today as a secondary school. Now, decades before the famous 1956 Women's Anti-Pass March, which you probably know, we commemorated every Women's Day, Maxeke led the country's first anti-pass campaign way before that. More than 700 women marched to the Bloemfontein City Council and burned their passes in 1913, led by the Bantu Women's League, which she founded. At a celebration in the Eastern Cape yesterday, President Cyril Ramaphosa spoke of Maxeke's enormous willpower and how she rose above the challenges that she lived in, that the time she lived in rather, threw at her. Her legacy was that of empowering oneself through education, and that once you have the tools to empower those around you. Today, many women walk in the footsteps of Maxeke, occupying boardrooms, teaching in lecture rooms, and taking part in formulating policies. Let's continue living her legacy. As she put it, this work is not for yourselves. Kill that spirit of self and do not live above your people, but live with them. If you can rise, bring someone with you. On to our next story, the bright side of the pandemic. We're constantly reminded of COVID's many downsides, job losses, deaths, loneliness, and a general change in the way we live. But while you may not have noticed it, the pandemic has brought some good to the world, according to The Atlantic. Firstly, it's revolutionized vaccine development. Scientists developed vaccines in record time for COVID, the fastest in history, in fact, and this was partly thanks to the new mRNA technology. Once a dismissed scientific idea, synthetic messenger RNA has proven to actually work. To explain what it is, we will quote from the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They say, to trigger an immune response, many vaccines put a weakened or inactivated germ into our bodies, but not the mRNA vaccines. Instead, they teach our cells how to make a protein or even just a piece of a protein that triggers an immune response inside our bodies. That immune response, which produces antibodies, is what protects us from getting infected if the real virus enters our bodies. Now look, it's been rigorously tested and previously used, so it is safe. The new mRNA coding helped several pharmaceutical companies to manufacture vaccines for the first time. So it wasn't just the old boys club and those who usually do vaccine development getting in on the game this time. The technology's successful application for COVID-19 means we can potentially fast-track treatment of future diseases. Secondly, the whole thing has made us more techno-savvy. Before the pandemic, we didn't think that big meetings, birthday parties, baby showers, and even court cases could be held online. How wrong we all were. Now all these virtual events are the order of the day. The other upside of using technology is that it has made public events and conferences more accessible, saving us travel time and money. Who knew we could attend a posh gallery opening from across the world in our sweats, imbibing the wine of our choice? We'll drink to that. And finally, it's brought scientists together. Scientists were able to find ways to easily collaborate and share knowledge, especially with scientific journals and publications. It's made the peer review process easier, accessible, and faster. Another win for science? We think so. In your entertainment news, Kim Kardashian West has just stepped into the Billionaires Club, which is joining soon-to-be ex-husband Kanye West. The owner of the cosmetic company KKW and Shapewear Skims, her net worth is now $1 billion, up from 780 million rand in October. That's equal to about 14.5 billion rand. This is thanks to endorsement deals and a number of private investments. Now, you may think all celebrities are this rich, but this achievement is actually pretty significant. To put it in perspective, Beyonce's net worth is less than half that, and even Rihanna, whose business savvy is renowned, is valued at just over half Kim's fortune at $600 million. This comes after Kim's younger sibling, Kylie Jenner, lost her place in the Billionaire Club last year after Forbes stripped her of her title. She was accused of inflating her business value. Jenner's inclusion was controversial initially, as she was dubbed a self-made billionaire. Critics felt that didn't add up given her family's enormous wealth and exposure. We were glad to see her later replaced as the list's youngest billionaire by a guy called Austin Russell in May. He is a tech genius and perhaps a more authentic self-made billionaire behind something called Luminaire Technologies, which works in renewable energies. Although the socialists within us can't help but think that there's no such thing as a self-made billionaire in such a vastly unequal global economy. But anyway, back to Kim. The 40-year-old has a career built over just over a decade in showbiz, along with a few controversies under her belt. Kim is yet to drop the West part of her name after she filed for divorce in February, citing certain irreconcilable differences between her and Kanye West. Lastly, thinking of investing in property, you're not alone, and it's not the craziest idea. We may be living through an economic downturn thanks to the pandemic, but thanks to record 50-year low interest rates and more houses on the market, this is a good time to buy. Data published by FNB on Tuesday showed that the commercial bank saw an incredible 46% increase in the number of consumers who purchased a second property in the fourth quarter of 2020 compared to the same period last year, Daily Maverick reported. And it's not just second-time buyers. Home ownership generally is now more affordable, resulting in a flood of first-time home buyers. As Daily Maverick puts it, it's a bright spot in an otherwise fragile economy. That's it from us at The Wrap, a product of Explained.co.za. Simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up at explained.co.za/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from me.